Hey, what's going on, you guys? This is Shane, Tuesday night meeting leader at Orca. Hope everybody's had a good week. Hope everybody's staying warm. Lord knows it's been cold out there. Try to give you guys a little bit of can you see it? A little bit of Christmas cheer, right? Hope everybody's having a good Christmas season so far. We're picking up this week on chapter 5 in the Smart Recovery Workbook. Um, this week it's managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The way it is set up is a lot like chapter 4, where we were analyzing the triggers that lead to urges and the specific things and thoughts and behaviors or situations that would lead to an urge. In this, it's set up much the same way. There's even some of the same exercises, diagrams, right down to the ABC worksheet that we did at the end of the last chapter. We have one of those in this one too. So basically, what we're looking at is more of our thought management. So looking a little bit deeper into not exactly what's a trigger, what's this, what's that, what sets that into motion, a lot of our behaviors, right? So of course, us being addicts, we have a lot of self-defeating behavior mechanisms, right? We're very hard on ourselves. We have repeating negative behavioral patterns that further depression, anxiety, behavioral patterns that are transferred to addictive behavioral patterns, and that's what this chapter kind of gives us something to look at, to put a handle on it, to start pointing that arrow in a different direction, in specific thought patterns, in specific details to those thought patterns, self-defeating thought patterns, irrational thoughts. One of the big things in this chapter is it's got to do with the fact, as you know, as addicts, we're pretty hard on ourselves. It doesn't really say that exactly in this chapter, but we are pretty hard on ourselves, and we tend to judge ourselves in a harsh light and view ourselves in a very negative light, especially early in recovery if our heart's set in recovery. We have all these self-defeating, it describes them in our chapter as downing beliefs. But, you know, things like, I'm a piece of crap. You know, I'm worthless. I'll never amount to anything. Or, you know, I can't defeat this thing, this behavior. You know, I'll always be like this. But what we're really doing, man, when we do all that, is we're just feeding into the sickness of our addiction, right? Because once you get to a point of, I don't care, I'm not worth it, it just makes you think, what's the point? And it's also easy. You're hard on yourselves, but it's also easy, because it's easy for us to continue those addictive behaviors when we don't care, or we just don't like ourselves very much. So downing beliefs, which talks about in the first page, we commonly hold on to downing beliefs in which we put ourselves, others, and our lives down. So that's kind of like what we just talked about. You know, I'm not a good person, I'm not a good father, blah, blah, blah. Or I'll never make up for this or that. That's putting some, a very big charge on our heart. And we've got to change those thought patterns. I'm so sorry, I've got the fan blowing my pages. All right. There we go. So we've got to learn to accept some of these things and challenge them, then change them as we go along. They talk about unconditional self-acceptance, and this is really good. Like, we have to do it. The past is the past. Um, it's true that a lot of our addictive behavior has cost some of us a lot. You know, we've sacrificed our belief systems along with actually hurting loved ones and hurting ourselves. Um, and the longer that we've used to stay out there, it seems the more of those things that we've compromised, and the harder it is to get back. But the important thing to remember as well is that drugs change you fundamentally as a human being, right down to your brain chemistry, especially if you're an opiate addict. Um, all drug addictions and addictions themselves have a pretty severe effect on a person. But with what most of us came to Orca for, you've changed your body right down to brain chemistry. And there's a lot of things to relearn and reprocess. Putting positive thought processes and changing your perspective in the ways that are very specific and described in this chapter are some of the most useful things that you can use going forward. Just like a lot of this other stuff, it's not just for in the beginning. It's you can keep using it going forward, keep it going. And it's hard for us to not judge ourselves. It's hard for a human being in themselves not to judge themselves, because the world we live in a world where people are so worried about judging other people, and most people think they have this deep understanding of life, so they have, they put labels on people. They did this, so that must mean that they're that. And so for an addict, it's doubly hard. We're doing that to ourselves. We think, okay, we did this, so that must mean we're that. I know personally, early in recovery, I thought a lot. Because the clouds are beginning to break, the sunlight's coming in, and you're really starting to analyze your life and the weight of the things you've done, and the thoughts that or the decisions you've made, and the chaos you've left has really started to hit you. Up until that point, we've had our addiction to buffer the real impact of that. But when we really start to change and want to change, it really takes an effect on us. So using the things described in this chapter to really pinpoint down some of our real bad, like rational and irrational thoughts is paramount. And even in the beginning, it even talks about with unconditional life acceptance, not just unconditional self-acceptance. But it's kind of like the first line in the Serenity Prayer. Please, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. It's, the whole Serenity Prayer, but you know what I mean. But moving on to the rational and irrational beliefs, kind of the things that they describe it in the chapter as things that are true and make sense and are helpful are rational, and irrational things are untrue, they don't make sense, and they're not helpful. But you can also say to that, not defining it as exactly true and untrue, but going down this list of irrational thought processes and thinking about what these mean to you. Unrealistic demands, irrational demands, unrealistic or irrational overgeneralizations, frustration, intolerance, awfulization. I love this one. Awfulization. Made up a word, and I love it because it's pretty much everything that we all the isations, or the isms, what does it say here? Laziest, cruelest, nastiest, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times we use these to describe our behavior as an addict. And, or, you know, we may judge other people, whatever. The important thing is that we're quick to jump to these, oh, the worst ever, oh, the laziest ever, oh, I'm an awful person, the worst ever. You know, I did this and this and this when I was, drugging, when I was in my addictive behaviors. But drugs change you fundamentally as a person. And the sooner we can accept that, the sooner we can have a paradigm shift and actually accept that, hey, that was a totally different person and I'm leaving them behind. I don't need to think this way about myself. I don't need to think this way about the people around me. Honestly, we shouldn't even be worried about the people around us early in recovery. We need to be selfish, worry about ourselves and our thought processes, And again, like I was saying earlier, we live in this place, this world where, everybody is worried about judging and who's done this and that, and, they are a certain way because they've done this and that, and not fully understanding what's going on, because nobody has all the answers. Nobody has a fundamentally singular, all-knowing understanding of life other than your higher power, and that's it. Leave the noises in the background. At least that's what we need to try to do. And before, in the middle of chapter 4, I believe, we had the exercise where we put out a trigger event, and then we put out, okay, this is what the consequence is, or whatever, or this is the trigger event. This is what I could do differently to avoid it. This thought process. This is what led to the trigger event, and this is what I could do to prevent the thought process that led to the trigger event. That kind of stuff. Well, here in disputing irrational behavior exercise, it's pretty much the same thing. Okay, whenever we look at a lot of these unhealthy thought processes, especially self-defeating ones, we need to really think about the ones that hurt the most, put those things down here and question why. And question, okay, what really makes this true? And I would, this is just me. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but in my rational beliefs, I would probably list why. If you put your irrational belief and you question your irrational belief, when I put down a rational belief in a lot of those things, I could probably put down where my changing me fundamentally as a person is the reason for a lot of these irrational beliefs or behavioral thought processes, addictive behavioral thought processes, if you will. But yes, and just like all the other exercises, it's always a good thing to refer back to. You never know. You might get a year clean, and then, I hate to bring up anything negative, but let's say you get to a relationship, and maybe a year clean, you're ready for a relationship, but the relationship isn't the most healthy relationship. And in that unhealthy relationship, you start to develop more self-defeating behaviors that you don't really recognize until after the relationship's over. Well, we all know how nothing can break or make a person like a good or bad relationship. And being in recovery, it makes it doubly as dangerous. So referring back to that in a time like that, it might be helpful just to put those things down. I was listening to somebody talk, and people were recovering. I can't remember if it was a show, but anyways, the man had years clean, and the lady he was talking to had years clean, and the guy was talking to his sponsee, and the sponsee had a question about dating, and she was high at the table, and he asked this woman that he knew, the sponsor asked the woman that he knew close by that was deep into her recovery. He's like, asked him how long she's been clean. It was over 12 years, and he asked, what would you say to anybody who's thinking about dating in the recovery? And she said, well, are you asking me if I wanted to date, or are you asking me if I wanted my recovery? Because I wanted both, but I knew that I couldn't take care of any relationship until I could take care of myself and my recovery. Even though I wanted both, this is what I needed. It's kind of funny, but it's very true. But anyways, I went off on a tangent. Just on with this strategy, which is changing your vocabulary and changing your feelings. So this is another very specific thing, right? We're looking at specific terms and phrases we use, trying to put them down, and then looking for something substantial to substitute them with. And I know this isn't 100% something you can't do 100% of the time, but things that we practice become things that we adhere to. And I know personally, there's been a few times I can remember whenever I was early in recovery in the late 2000s, and I used to have I used to have pretty bad cravings in the beginning, and I would tell myself, this is just okay. This is just the devil getting to me. I don't need to be thinking like this. I need to be thinking like, this is where the devil wants me to fail. And if that's not your belief system, I don't mean to offend, but that's just kind of an example of substituting those bad things you think or say with a disputable reference that you can hold to and give power to. You know, a lot of all this stuff is only going to have as much power as you allow it to have. In this book and in your recovery, you know, we can will this stuff to work into existence if we want. It just matters how motivated we are and how much we really want it. And I'm sure if you're listening to by the time you've got to chapter 5, listening to me, if you're still listening to me stutter around and act nervous on camera, you probably want it pretty bad. Because I know I'm hard to deal with. I'm just joking. But also with the exercise 5, part 4 of exercise 5, very basic statement exchanges and emotional verbal exchanges, and it gives very specific phrase flops, or what to exchange what word with. Instead of saying, oh, I'm terribly anxious, you can say, I feel concerned. Yeah, that's pretty, I hate to feel like you're wasting your time listening to me. I know that sounds obvious, but hey, those little bitty things are the things that are going to matter the most. Just like in anything, all the little things added up, if you take care of them, the big things become a lot easier to carry. So you guys just remember that. Whenever you're going through, if you want to refer back to chapter 4 before you move back to the ABC of emotional upsets, and basically the same, it's the same layout and concept as the one in chapter 4 as in chapter 5. That way it just, honestly, I like to connect my thought processes and my addictive behaviors, because I'm bipolar, and it's important. You guys might not have a bad problem with it, but I think that correlating both of those together is a good exercise in itself. But, you know, you can do what you want, but like last week, it's pretty self-explanatory. You have the A stands for the activating event, B is the belief about event, concern of my irrational belief, dispute my irrational belief. So we just put irrational belief instead of triggers or urge in chapter that we use in chapter 4. So guys, really, in summarizing this chapter, it might seem a little overzealous to sit down and dissect every single thought process you have, but it's the kind of work we do have to do if we're gonna change our very perceptions. And we might not be able to change every perception, but we've got to change a few and change them in a positive way, man. Because I don't know about you, but every one of my relapses or even depressive episodes that didn't even involve a relapse, a dry drunk, as they call it, started with an irrational belief, a depressing or self-defeating thought process. And whether it makes you feel sorry for yourself or hate yourself, it doesn't matter. It all leads back to a place where there is a chance of a relapse. Might be 1 in 100, might be 1 in 10, might be 1 in a million, but there's still that chance. The more we can reduce those type of events from happening, we're going to have so much more success in our recovery. And we're going to be so much happier, you guys. And that's the point, you know. Everybody who's watching this is watching this for a reason. And your higher power has a plan for you. I think I've said it before that there's probably a lot of people who've done a lot less than you who are either in jail or in the grave. You know, maybe there's a reason you're still here. You know, and with the holidays coming up and all the good and bad feelings that might surround this season, it's important to be thankful for the fact that you're clean, that you're in a state where you even would consider watching a YouTube video like this, because I know I wouldn't be caught dead watching a guy talk for 20 to 30 minutes whenever I was not clean. No, sir. And probably none of you would either. But, you know, these little steps get us eventually to that goal of where it's just easy. It's easy. It gets it to, when we start with the small stuff, work our way up, just like we talked about, peeling the layers of the onion back. This is the next step in that onion. Last week we peeled it back to where we were looking at the urges and the triggers to the urges. And we pull it a little bit further back to what are these thought processes that cause self-defeating behavior, that causes the behavior that would maybe instigate a trigger event, or another behavior that instigates a trigger event that leads to an urge. You know, it goes on. And eventually you guys will get into your past and, you know, deal with all that. But, you know, if you're early in recovery or just planning on working through this book, use 4 and 5 together, man. They work great. And I think that those are the real basis of what leads us back to a trigger event, is this understanding how this leads back to an urge. Understanding how this leads to a trigger makes our trigger events less likely to hold a strangle hold on us. Sorry. Before I end, I wanted to read something at the beginning. You guys can read it there, I'm sure, but, you know, it's very true, and this is what you guys need to remember throughout your recovery process. And this was written by Nick Rajakic. I hope I said that right. He is a smart recovery facilitator, and it says, I accept myself because I'm alive and I have the capacity to enjoy my existence. I am not my behavior. I can evaluate my behavior, but it is impossible to accurately and honestly evaluate the complexity of myself. I strive for achievement only to enhance the enjoyment of my existence, not to prove my worth. Failing at a task doesn't make me a failure. I can choose to accept myself even if I am unwilling or unable to change my character defects, because there is no law of the universe that says I can't. My self-approval cannot come from pandering to an external source or bowing to an external authority. My self-acceptance can only come from within me, and I am free to choose it at any time. There it is, guys, too. What we've done is not who we are. And who you are is someone who has hope and has a chance of beating this thing. So, you guys, until next time, stay strong, stay positive this holiday season. Like I always say, if you need to chat with somebody, call the front office, tell the girls, hey, Shane said I could get his number and text him, whatever. But yeah, do that if you need to. Or just reach out to the office, man. There's a lot of good resources at Orca. If it wasn't for them, I know I would be alive and a whole lot of other people. So, till next week, guys, we'll get into Chapter 6. And I hope you guys have an excellent week. Take care of yourselves. Much love. Have a good holiday season.